Today, I want to dive deep into a fascinating branch of philosophy that's all about knowledge. It's called epistemology. Now, don't let the fancy words scare you off. Epistemology is basically the study of how we know what we know. It tackles questions like, what is knowledge? How do we acquire it? And can we truly know anything at all? So let's break it down and explore some of the big ideas and debates in this field. Buckle up, because this is going to be a comprehensive journey through the landscape of human knowledge. First off, let's talk about the basics. What is knowledge? Traditionally, philosophers have defined knowledge as justified true belief. This means that for someone to know something, three criteria must be met. It must be true, they must believe it's true, and they must have good reasons or justification for believing it's true. But, of course, it's not that simple. This definition has faced challenges, one of the most famous being the Gettier problem. In the 1960s, a philosopher named Edmund Gettier published a short paper that showed situations where someone could have justified true belief. But we wouldn't necessarily say they have knowledge. Imagine, for instance, you look at a clock and it says it's 2 p.m. You believe it's 2 p.m., and your belief is justified because clocks generally tell the correct time. However, unbeknownst to you, the clock stopped exactly 24 hours ago, and by sheer coincidence, it's correct at this moment. Do you really have knowledge that it's 2 p.m.? Gettier would say no, because your belief is true by luck, not because you truly know it. Next, let's move on to how we acquire knowledge. This takes us into the debate between rationalism and empiricism. Rationalists argue that knowledge comes primarily from intellectual reasoning and innate ideas. Think of Descartes, who famously said, "I think, therefore I am." Rationalists believe that some concepts are hardwired into our brains from birth. This means that there are certain things we just know without needing to experience them directly. Descartes, for example, used the method of doubt to strip away all uncertain beliefs, concluding that the act of thinking itself was undeniable proof of existence. On the other hand, empiricists like John Locke and David Hume argue that all knowledge comes from sensory experience. For them, the mind starts as a blank slate, and everything we know comes from what we perceive through our senses. Locke's famous idea of the tabula rasa emphasizes this point. Empiricists believe that our understanding of the world is built up from individual sensory impressions, which are then combined into complex ideas. Hume took this even further by suggesting that even concepts like causation and identity are not inherent to the world, but are habits of thought formed through repeated experiences. This debate gets really interesting when we start discussing things like scientific knowledge, which relies heavily on empirical evidence but also on theoretical reasoning. Scientific methods typically combine both rationalist and empiricist elements. Theories are developed through logical reasoning, and then tested and refined through observation and experimentation. Another key topic in epistemology is skepticism. Skeptics question whether we can know anything with certainty. They raise doubts about the reliability of our senses, the validity of our reasoning, and even the existence of the external world. One of the classic skeptical challenges comes from Descartes himself. He imagined a scenario where a malicious demon deceives him into believing a false reality. If this were true, how could he ever know anything for certain? This kind of radical skepticism pushes us to think deeply about the foundations of our knowledge. More modern forms of skepticism include philosophical arguments about brain-in-a-vat scenarios, where a person could be just a brain in a vat being fed false experiences. Or consider the simulation hypothesis, popularized by Nick Bostrom, which suggests that it's possible we're living in a computer simulation. If either of these scenarios were true, it would mean that much of what we take for granted about our reality could be false. Addressing these skeptical challenges often leads to exploring foundational questions about what counts as evidence and how we can achieve certainty. And then we have different theories of justification. How do we justify our beliefs? Foundationalism is one theory that suggests that all knowledge is built on a foundation of basic, self-evident truths. Think of it like a pyramid, where these basic beliefs form the base, supporting all other beliefs. For example, sensory perceptions might be considered foundational. You see a tree. You form the belief that there is a tree, and this belief doesn't require further justification because it's directly tied to your sensory experience. Coherentism, on the other hand, argues that beliefs are justified if they cohere or fit well with a system of interconnected beliefs. It's more like a web where each belief supports and is supported by others. Instead of relying on foundational beliefs, coherentism looks at the overall consistency and mutual support of our belief system. If a belief fits well within this web and helps make sense of other beliefs, it's considered justified. Reliabilism is another interesting approach, suggesting that beliefs are justified if they are produced by reliable cognitive processes. If your belief-forming process is generally dependable, then your belief is justified. This theory ties in nicely with our modern understanding of cognitive science and psychology. For instance, if you form a belief based on clear and undistorted perception, which is a reliable process, then that belief is justified. Let's not forget about the social dimension of knowledge, social epistemology. This examines the communal aspects of knowledge creation and dissemination. It looks at how social processes, institutions, and networks contribute to what we know. In today's world, with the internet and social media, this field is more relevant than ever. We have to navigate a sea of information, and understanding the credibility of sources, the impact of echo chambers, and the role of expert testimony becomes crucial. Think about how we come to accept scientific facts. It's often through a community of researchers who validate and verify each other's work. There's also the role of testimony in knowledge acquisition. Much of what we know comes from the testimony of others. From learning history to understanding scientific concepts, we rely heavily on the knowledge passed down by others. This raises questions about trust and credibility. When and why should we trust others' accounts? And how do we verify their reliability? And what about the limits of human knowledge? This is where we get into the realm of agnosticism and the unknown. Are there things that are fundamentally beyond our understanding? Some philosophers argue that there are inherent limits to what we can know, given the constraints of our cognitive faculties. This is sometimes discussed in the context of the philosophy of science, where we encounter the idea that some questions might be unanswerable, not because they are beyond our grasp, but because they lie outside the domain of empirical inquiry. One significant discussion in this area is the debate over scientific realism versus anti-realism. Scientific realists believe that our scientific theories describe the world as it actually is. Anti-realists, however, argue that scientific theories are just useful tools for predicting phenomena, and we can't be sure they accurately describe an objective reality. This debate ties back into epistemology by questioning the extent to which scientific knowledge can give us true insights into the nature of the world. Another fascinating topic in epistemology is the concept of epistemic virtues. This idea suggests that certain intellectual traits like open-mindedness, intellectual courage, and intellectual humility contribute to good epistemic practices. By cultivating these virtues, individuals can improve their ability to acquire and justify knowledge. This perspective ties epistemology to ethics and character, highlighting the personal qualities that aid in the pursuit of truth. Moreover, we should touch on the idea of epistemic injustice, a concept developed by philosopher Miranda Fricker. Epistemic injustice occurs when someone is wronged specifically in their capacity as a knower. This can happen in two primary forms: testimonial injustice, where someone's word is unfairly discredited due to prejudice, and hermeneutical injustice, where a gap in collective interpretive resources puts someone at an unfair disadvantage in making sense of their social experiences. Addressing epistemic injustice involves not only recognizing these wrongs, but also working to create more inclusive and equitable epistemic environments. So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of epistemology. It's a vast and intricate field, and what we've covered today just scratches the surface. Whether you're interested in the nature of truth, the reliability of knowledge, or the impact of social networks on what we believe, Epistemology offers a treasure trove of questions to explore.